Good evening. Today is the 29th day of October 2015, and we continue with our explorations in Savitri, Book 1, Canto 5, with our dear friend Alok, as always, Namaskar. We should read often the mother's words on Savitri. In her own hand, she wrote, Savitri, the supreme revelation of Sri Aurobindo's vision. And she once said to Udar, Savitri is a mantra for the transformation of the world. And to Norman Dowsett, she said, for the opening of the psychic, for the growth of consciousness, and even for the improvement of English, it is good to read 1 or 2 past pages of Savitri each day. Lastly, to Sat Prem, she said, I believe that it is his message. All the rest are the preparations, but Savitri is the message.
Before we start, I think we are on page 82. My attention goes to this last bit of Mother's message, even to improve English.
Yes.
And I think it's important to remember because today itself, this discussion was going on with someone on translating Savitri. And Mother, in a letter to Prithvi Singh Nahar, makes it very clear that Savitri is untranslatable.
I remember that letter.
Yes. And then she says that, she has also translated portions of it in French.
Yes.
She says, I also do it, and it's perfectly fine to do it for your own growth and progress, and for your joy, but not for printing and publication. Now, here I find something very interesting, that very often people say that, that's very nice, but then, what do? We can't read Savitri because
In English. Yes.
So I think it's good to learn a little bit of English and improve the English by reading Savitri. This is something very nice. And it is part of Indian tradition. Just to go a little backward. I mean, people have learned Sanskrit to read the Vedas, the Upanishads, and the Gita in original. And I must tell you that with all my love for Sanskrit, it's a very beautiful language, there's no doubt. For me, it comes naturally. And yet, English is not that difficult, if I compare the two. I mean, if I have to read the Vedas in original after reading Sanskrit, for many, it would be easier because it's a much simpler language, English. Sanskrit is a very, very evolved and a very complex language with a lot of logical thing into it. English is comparatively simpler. The structure is simpler. It's so easier. And another thing is that, like Guru Granth Sahib, this is one example of Sanskrit. Guru Granth Sahib is a Sikh scripture, and it's in, of course, what today we call it ignorantly as Punjabi language. But originally it was called as Gurumukhi. Even now it is called as Gurumukhi. So Gurumukhi is literally the language of the Gurus. So, you learn Gurumukhi to know the thing in original. And I feel it is one of the signs of our dedication, of our love for Sri Aurobindo, is that if for nothing else, we learn English just to read him in English. People learn French to read the Mother in French. And I think it's beautiful. So this, it just caught my attention.
And I love that line where, I don't know, you may know the reference, but they said Sri Aurobindo didn't write in English.
Yes.
He wrote English.
This is with reference to V.K. Gokak. So this was told to me by someone who was present in the meeting, and someone told Gokak that he's not sure whether, Sri Aurobindo, it's the right English, it's something like that. That's really not really relevant, but Gokak's answer was very relevant. He said, it's not English that Sri Aurobindo writes, But what Sri Aurobindo writes is English. So I suppose, like many things, they have also transformed the language. And look, how he has enriched. Look here. I mean, of course, great poetry has been written in English, without a doubt. Wordsworth and my personal favorite, Shelley, of course, of all times, and many others, William Blake, Walt Whitman. They are really amazing poets.
Yes.
But look at this line. It immediately takes you to what sublime riches of experience. His spirit breathed a superhuman air. Now, this is a mystic experience. It's an experience when you grow into the cosmic consciousness and the transcendent. And then the imprisoned deity rent its magic fence, as with a sound of thunder and of seas, vast barriers crashed around the huge escape. So this is what we were, discussing. The imprisoned deity is the soul. At another place, I think it is it Amal Kiran's poem? No, it's someone else who described the soul as a bird whose wings are frozen with ice, and she wants to fly but is unable to fly, and must wait for the sun to thaw the ice which has, is preventing the wings to really grow white. So there are so many images of the bird, the soul, being imprisoned in a magic fence. It's a magic fence. It's surrounded by doubt, despair, denials, pain, pleasure, which keep us moving in a fixed groove of thought, activity, if nothing else, suggestions that we will think about it later. This is nothing but nature's suggestion. Even when there is a spiritual impulse, there is always a later, a later, a later. And somebody would apply to Sri Aurobindo that I want to join the ashram because now all my worldly activities and duties are over. And Sri Aurobindo gave a very interesting reply. Now is the time to apply to the graveyard. So, this is how nature keeps us tied.
Yes.
It doesn't allow us. Always there is something. Always there is a problem. Always there is an issue. Always there is a difficulty. And it will keep creating. Sometimes it is this, sometimes it's that. We swing between an attraction for pleasure or between a pain which we must tackle. And of course, sometimes the divine plays the game of that Francis Thomas, the Hound of Heaven.
Ah, yes.
And make sure that we are chased into his arms. There was a person who was telling me about how she would see ghosts all over, and ghost would chase, and ghost would do this, and ghost, and frightened girl. And she said, but when I come to Pondicherry, everything is fine. So I said, it's a lovely ghost. He is doing a good job.
Getting you to come.
Getting you to come. Perhaps the divine call wouldn't do something and he had to send a ghost to make sure that, you're here. So it's amazing, that nature keeps us tied in a magic fence. Really, if we look at this world, what is it that holds us? Every day we realize, and we will see it here, it's a sorcery. It's like we are glued. There are people who are glued before a TV when they have nothing else to do. It's nothing, it's not real, and it holds us.
And he doesn't say a prison, and he doesn't say great walls.
Yeah.
He just says a fence.
Fence
But it's magic.
and magic fence. You don't know, you don't see the walls. You say, I am free. Look at this other. What a magic fence. It gives us the illusion of freedom, if nothing else. And regards the one act which will set us free, the act of surrender, as something which will bind us. Look at the paradox.
Yes.
I am a free thinker. I am a free man. So I don't surrender. Now that is nature's way to catch it and say, well, you are my prey. But the one act which will liberate, the act of surrender, is regarded as bondage. So, it's a magic fence where in many ways. But what happens, and it's a pure mystic experience. We were talking about Mirabai, and she speaks about Badal dekh dare. Main suni Hari Avan ki awaaj. Before the Lord comes, before him, you have the thunder of the hooves which trample over everything. Life turns topsy-turvy. And it's an inner experience. And the whole being is frightened because it knows its time has come to lose itself completely in the divine.
And in Savitri, we have the hooves of the
Hooves of
superhuman
the
rider.
superhuman rider. And it's not picturesque. People actually have these inner experiences of thunder. And here he describes it: vast barriers crashed around the huge escape. Once the soul is enamored by the divine, nothing can eventually hold. Immutably coeval with the world, circle and end of every hope and toil. Inexorably drawn round thought and act, the fixed, immovable peripheries efface themselves beneath the incarnate's tread. Who is Ashwapati?
This is very powerful.
Time to time, he moves, and as he moves, vast barriers crash around. The immovable peripheries. So symbolic the story of Krishna. The mother said that the seers who wrote the Bhagavad were endowed with a subtle vision. And what they have written, because she responds to that with regard to a aphorism of Sri Aurobindo, where he talks about people who write history and they regard these stories as myths and legends. And Sri Aurobindo says, then thanks for the myths and legends because they save the soul alive. And then she says they had the sheer vision, and because of that, they could write the symbolic story of the soul. So Bhagavad is the story of the soul. And look, where is it captured? In a prison. Prison which is guarded by heavy sentinels. The king itself has passed orders. This child, every child must die who is born to the womb. And there is a whole kingdom, and yet vast barriers crash. And the child escapes around Yamuna, which is in spate. So it's a symbol of the soul which escapes despite everything.
And fixed, immovable
Yes.
peripheries efface themselves.
Yes. And how we are drawn in this circle, round thought and act. This is the circle. Circle and end of every hope and toil. The dire velamen and the bottomless crypt. So there is a line above and there is a line below. Pain with its whiplash, joy with its silver bribe guards the wheels circling immobility. And then he says the dual tables and the karmic norm restrain in us the titan
And the
god. So human consciousness is to move within a certain frame, just like animal consciousness. So nature has fixed lanes, like it's an interesting image of air passage. When aircrafts fly, of course people don't know, they think it's flying in the vast. But actually, it's not as simple as that. There are corridors. So every flight has a corridor. So before it flies, it is given a corridor, and this corridor is according to the coordinates. So every flight must strictly follow that route. So the moment it takes off, the ATC will give it this route, this much feet, this angle, this way you have to go. And the aircraft keeps on getting in touch with subsequent ATCs and getting this corridor. So though it looks it's nothing, it can go into the blue sky, but it cannot. Actually, there is a corridor in which it must fly. Otherwise, there will be a crash. And things have happened like that.
Yes.
Now, this is what I find very interesting, that human consciousness moves within a range. It's a corridor. It is prevented from going beyond the human range of virtue and vice into the utter freedom and unity of God. But it also is prevented from getting a glimpse of the bottomless pit, lest it be sucked into that. So there is a reason why nature has created it. It is a safeguard. Otherwise, it's dangerous. Sri Aurobindo speaks of that in the Synthesis of Yoga, that not everybody can take the kingdom of heaven by storm. So Sri Ramakrishna's example is a rare example. People go mad. They lose all sense and proportion. So human measure is given for that purpose. But slowly we can enlarge, and subsequently a time will come when the far becomes near and the small becomes vast. But it's a slow process.
There's a song from the Bible, I believe, about Ezekiel.
Right.
Ezekiel saw the wheel, and there was a large wheel and a small wheel that was returning in the big wheel.
Wow.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the whole passage from the Ishopanishad. Jagatyam Jagat. It's almost like visualizing the entire movement of nature, all encompassing. The vast and the narrow, and they are all together. It's something amazing. So, this is how human consciousness moves. Nature makes us move. But Ashwapati is not another ordinary mortal. He is an incarnate voice, or incarnate voice arisen in an inconscient world. So when he aspires, then all these barriers crash. And then what happens? You see, it's an amazing, even an adventure tale. If you look at it like an epic, imagine that experience when the dire velamen and the bottomless pit, they give way. What is that experience of all these energies and forces rushing into? The Titan and the god battled for his soul as for a costly prize. What kind of experience it must be that he describes? The dire velamen and the bottomless crypt, between which life and thought forever move. This is our corridor.
There it is.
Don't. That's why human beings can never know the remedy for evil, because they don't know the source of evil. It's from the bottomless crypt. And that's why they cannot cure it, because they don't know the cure has to come from above.
Yes.
The dire velamen.
And Freud searching the endless pit.
Yes, that will come several places in Savitri.
Yes.
Forbidden still to cross the dim, dread bounds, the guardian darknesses, mute and formidable, empowered to circumscribe the wingless spirit in the boundaries of mind and ignorance. So they are empowered. They are told, no, you have to keep it bound towards nature, like the ostrich, ostrich is an interesting symbol.
Yes.
The bird, which is so huge, which can not only, there are two things about ostrich. One is that it's a symbol of ignorance, because instinctively it digs into the sand,
Puts his head in the sand.
head in the sand when there is a danger. So it's one symbol. But look at the physical symbol also. Nature creates in such a way. It's the bird which is so large,
He can't fly.
it can't fly, but it can run very fast on ground. As if it's running fast on the ground, it is itself a disqualification. Nature has endowed. So there are people with very brilliant practical mind, very rational, who can argue anything to the end. And they think it's a great quality. But for the sparrow that knows what it means to fly, it's a disqualification. So it's a symbol of ignorance in a double way.
Yes.
So it keeps it tied. It won't let it fly, because that's how it's trained in the boundaries of mind and ignorance, protecting no more a dual eternity, the eternal light above and the seeming eternal darkness.
Yes.
The conception of eternal hell. Though of course Sri Aurobindo says that there is nothing like an eternal hell in that sense, but the experience is like that, because there is the eternal hiding there in the inconscient.
Yes.
It stretches as if infinite. So that's why the experience of,
And then this line that they vanish.
yes, vanished, rescinding their enormous role. What was their role? To keep the human consciousness within a certain narrow frame.
Yeah.
It vanishes. So we have this interesting symbol in Tao. The two fishes, within the dark fish, there is the seed of light. Within the bright fish, we see that it has its eyes black. It sees the darkness, knows the darkness. And when the two come together, then there is perfection. And the mother has said, Thou is the symbol of Parbrahman, what in India is called as Parbrahman. It's a state of consciousness in which the dark and the bright poles unite. and get transmuted. I think last time
We'll
we
see
spoke
that in
about
Savitri also.
They
Yes.
get transmuted.
Many
They no more
times.
remain that.
Yes.
But human consciousness must move within a duality of virtue and vice, good and bad. So that vanished. Once figure of creation's vain ellipse, the expanding zero lost its giant curve. So it's very interesting again that all evolution is a spiral process. It's not a straight line. So you go like this and come, then you go further. It's like if you, these motorbike cyclists who play in that giant wheel
yes,
inside.
yes.
They start with a small circle, and they go faster and faster in expanding curves. If we really look at even from pure physics, that if you make this movement to a particle, it may get accelerated to a point where it will escape eventually the whole power of gravity. So something very similar happens with the human consciousness. It slowly expands and expands in both directions. So this journey is very interesting. It's not just a journey of from darkness to light. It's a constant re-engaging with the darkness, with the light we have found. And after that is thinned out, once again to a greater light. Once again we return and climb further and further and further till the whole boundaries are lost. This is the normal course of the journey. The old adamantine vetoes stood no more. The other day, this line I am reminded of. The other day, there was a discussion going on in UNO that we should not follow this veto system, which is the privilege of a few countries.
The five.
Yeah. And very interesting remark. They said it was given during a certain situation. There was a certain exigency. But in their new challenges which have arisen, and these vetoes should stand no more if there is a problem of genocide or severe crime against humanity, in which case the veto cannot apply. It's very interesting. There is a change going on all over. Mother fought with the laws of nature. The same thing is being reflected at the level of the nationalities, international levels. That no, this idea of veto, yes, it's a power, but it cannot be an adamantine power. It must give way at some point of time if there is a greater truth and a larger light.
Were held by one country against another country.
Yes.
And this we have seen
endlessly. So here we have, of course, in a different context, but see how the two correlate with each other, that these power of veto of nature, old adamantine vetoes, I won't allow you to escape. You may be a saint, you have to meet the same fate. This holds no more. Only we have to have faith in it and walk. To Mother, people would say, several times she would speak in the agenda, they keep telling me I am an old woman, I am an old woman, I am an old woman. I am younger than all of them. I am the youngest of all. But they don't see it. And then she says, why they are not able to see? So you see, what was it? Veto from the collective consciousness. How can you say that you are not old? Because we see that you are old. And she describes that now I understand it's their angle of vision from which matter appeared something hard and rigid. But from the way I experience it, it's something malleable, it's something plastic, and she says it's true matter. She says, but they don't have this vision. But they're the old adamantine vetoes.
This word adamantine, and many words that we've seen in the last weeks, is something we should look up as often as possible. Because, well, I have a dream, an aspiration, that one day, when Savitri is online for all of us, we highlight a word, we get the definition, at the same time the pronunciation.
Yes. That would be wonderful.
By a proper English speaking,
absolutely.
not an American.
Absolutely. Not by an Indian either.
Touche.
My English is, I mean, I keep telling people. So that's true, and it's very interesting. Look, overpowered were earth and nature's obsolete rule.
Obsolete.
They were with a certain purpose. And we have to have faith. The big difficulty is that even when some part of us has faith, the cells, they cannot have faith. That's what Mother says. The physical consciousness. It cannot believe that the grace can take care. It can resolve its problems. It knows better. This is an obsolete rule. Sickness is an obsolete rule. There should be no sickness anymore in the world. Disease should vanish from the face of earth.
And how she worked cell by cell.
Cell by cell.
To bring the light.
Bring the light. So these are habits of nature which must go away. The python coils of the restricting law could not restrain the swift arisen God. Again, in the Vedas, there is a story that after Indra of course in the Puranic legends is a different god. He is full of jealousies and insecure fellow who is more a godhead of the higher mind than anything else. But in the Vedas, Indra is, almost like the overmind godhead. His status is very high. And this Indra has to fight a last battle, the battle against the demon Vritrasur. Now, Vritrasur is a giant python. And what it does, it surrounds the city as the legend goes and fills it with water, and the water is prevented from flowing freely. And it surrounds and says, I am going to sit over it. And then Indra must slay this serpent demon, and it must slay it with the power of, it's very interesting, the whole story is very interesting, that the weapon that Indra uses to slay this creature is the product of a great seer's bones, in which he had accumulated all the celestial powers in his body and bones. And he lets light lick up all his body, and only the bones are left with which he makes a weapon. Now you see, it's very interesting that the body itself, look at bones. When I connect it to the mother's yoga, I see, my God, they had some kind of a prevision that the body itself must accumulate that force and energy to that extent that consciousness, the higher consciousness, can slay Vritrasur, the demon who prevents the free flow of the waters of the divine energy in us. And the interesting part, why this is not just a freak revelation, it's there in the agenda. The other day I was reading, of course, this story symbol used to come to me like this, and I was so happy that Mother refers to this story when she speaks about the last battle in the agenda. And she says the whole sense of Indra and the Vritrasur legend in the Vedas appeared to me. That he surrounds. So you see the python coils, restricting law, how the python prevents the creature to breathe. Yeah. Restricting law. We don't even realize it, and we say it's natural.
And the python doesn't bite.
It doesn't bite. It just swallows. It restricts and finishes. And see, this is how this law operates. It just surrounds us. It makes us full of disbelief, distrust. And that's why eventually, we are not able to grow further. But here is someone else. It could not restrain the swift arisen God, who simply slays the python law and goes beyond. But see the difference now. Question arises then, what is the difference between this and what the mother has done? Ashupati escaped from the law. He knew now that there is a greater law. But the law for the average person yet remains unchanged. And now his effort with the mother's grace is to change the law. That's why Sri Aurobindo says that before the mother's coming, I could help myself. But with the mother's coming, others could be helped. The law does not change. Yes. He has broken free all frames, goes beyond. Because then people, then if Ashwapati himself, that is Sri Aurobindo himself, is so mighty. And why mother? What is left? Because she, as the supreme divine nature, she knows the nature and she can transmute it, change it. Alone her hands can change time's dragon ways. Escape? Yes. To discover the supramental? Yes. To pull it for oneself? Yes. But the law doesn't change for the many. So here we are being described that escape, which comes because of the great descent. It all begins with that. Abolished were the scripts of destiny. He is no more subject to the scripts of destiny. He can pick and choose. There was no small, death-hunted creature more. No fragile form of being to preserve from an all-swallowing immensity. Look at these three lines which reveal the secret even of death. Many, many things it reveals. Why, there is a need to die. So one reason that Sri Aurobindo gives in the Life Divine is because in our depths we are infinite. And we want to have the experience of the infinite, but on a finite basis. This is given to us. It's a challenging task. So we try and try, we expand, we grow within whatever limits given in a particular lifetime. And a time comes when this immensity, this infinity eventually says, enough. This form cannot go further.
Cannot hold it anymore.
Cannot hold it anymore. And then we come back again. But this is the effort. To be immense. That's why there is a secret attraction for unity, for oneness. However hard we may deny it on the surface, deep inside there is a secret, as if thread of life which is running parallel to the superficial. In nature we see it. Variety, 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 endless variety, but deep inside a unity. So immensity, this immensity takes the form of death for us when we live in ignorance. But when we awaken to knowledge, when we grow into vastness, we read that line, the triple chord, when we are in freedom of the infinite, then there is no more death. Death dies. That's how you put it. Death dies. The end of death, the death of ignorance.
Yes.
The great hammer beats of a pent-up world heart. Again, Mother's experience in the agenda. She speaks of this as the yoga of the world. And she says she was identified with love at the origin. And each pulsation was spreading into wider and wider and wider circles. That's what the divine does. People say divine punished, divine tested, divine did this, divine did that. Divine knows only one thing. To love. He doesn't know anything else. And that includes everything. But depending on how we receive it, we experience it as a blow or we are bathed in delight. It just depends on how. We can say that human beings have this attitude or that attitude. But for the divine, there is only one thing. To love, love and love that pulsation which is at the core of creation. Constantly that pulsation. That's why the closer we go to the divine, the more we feel that love, that intense love, that powerful love. Because that is the essence. And look how beautiful lines. The great hammer beats of a pent-up world heart burst open the narrow dams that keep us safe against the forces of the universe. Again, we have that reference to the Vritra story, the waters. So this throbbing, this pent-up heart which has exerted itself, gone to its utmost limit, and then suddenly as if there is a release and all the waters flow majestically. It's like you go through a narrow gorge and suddenly you find yourself in the vastness of God's embrace. What an experience he's describing. It's an intense experience.
If we look at this line, hammer beats,
Yes.
pent up,
Yes.
and world heart,
Yes.
each of those are hyphenated.
Yes.
I asked Nalini about this, and he said Sri Aurobindo makes a new word when he hyphenates two words. In one line, 3 hyphenated words.
And see this image of the dams. You see, dams are nothing but, the rivers that are flowing freely. Dams are nothing but, walls built around the flow. And we say this dam or that dam. But when the dam opens, it's the one river.
Yes.
And we know what that river can do when the dams are open. It's a tremendous power. So, human consciousness believes it's my nature, this energy, my energy, but it's just a little bit given within the dam in which we put our efforts and we tire. But the day we open by that tremendous stroke, the world heart as if beats and the entire dam opens. And the gushing of the current sometimes is described as Kundalini, the awakening to the cosmic consciousness, to the cosmic force. And there are so many ways. Then look what happens. Burst open the narrow dams that keep us safe against the forces of the universe. People enjoy the dam. They go for a picnic. Even our own boys and girls go to picnic, Hoginakkal Dam. And imagine what happened when the dam burst open once. Even a little extra water was released. People have drowned. There are stories like that. In Haridwar, just because the extra water was released, boys who were playing were just washed away. So we are given a certain amount of energy because we seek very limited things. And when we seek limited things, we will be given limited consciousness. So when we look at the world problems and say, who bothers about spirituality and all this is too much, we need only, there is an unfortunate slogan in India by the Communist Party, Roti, Kapda or Makan. Human beings don't need spiritual things and all. We need bread to eat, we need clothes to wear, and we need a roof. If that is our need, we will never grow beyond it. But if we say that my need is the divine, the cosmos, the creation, its origin, then all this will naturally come to us and much more than we can hold because it's a gushing of the dam. In fact, we will find it difficult to hold the leap of faith in the Bible. So this is the leap, and in Ashwapati's case, it has happened. The soul and cosmos faced as equal powers. What marvelous lines. I mean, each one, what an epic. We are all the time worried like death-hunted creatures. What may happen? Let me have the contact with these doctors. They may save me. This lawyer, oh, important man. His card I must keep safe. Who knows, tomorrow I may be in a legal problem and he may help me. The police fellow, I must make friends. Maybe the priest, he will intercede. But the soul in man is greater than his fate and needs nothing but itself. It has to just become conscious.
And here the soul and cosmos
Faced as equal powers. If destiny brings before me the worst faces, then my soul has the power to confront each of its masks, to tear it and see the truth behind, to see the face of Krishna, the divine beloved, behind cosmos the terrible. So this is the power of the given to the soul. And that's why challenges come. They are not punishment, they are challenges. And the soul can face it as equal powers. And see, this again we see it happening. How human beings are venturing even to get into other planets, other parts of creation, materially even. Why should we be tied to a small little space? And it's a outer translation of an inner need to expand. Boundless being in a measureless time invaded nature with the infinite. Nature becomes small. The universe becomes nothing but a corner of one's being. There is a line in Savitri much later, in Savitri's yoga, cosmic consciousness, where she experiences Arcturus and Belphegor burn in a corner of your boundless self. They are two constellations. Imagine these possibilities. And we remain so limited, so small. Thoughts move into what's going to happen tomorrow. What will happen? What am I going to eat? Next meal. Oh, I have a stomach upset. Is it something serious? Do I have dengue? How silly. If you look at the vastness that we are capable of. So, these lines are very inspiring. He saw unpathed, unwalled his titan scope. There should be in man something of the titan also. Mother speaks of that. For a full perfection, this is aphorism of Sri Aurobindo, he must have something in him even of the titan. So what is it about the titan? Titan doesn't give up. The stride of the titan, it wants to, it won't stop at littleness. It wants large, it wants more. Of course, it wants it ignorantly, arrogantly, egoistically. Hence he falls. But something of the titan scope, that our being can grow measureless beyond time. And if we really look at these experiences, we just wonder. And then we come back to earth, death-hunted creature, bent with a stick in hand. This is not me. Even in rags, I am God. Fallen, I am divine. Long I live, when slain. This is the consciousness. I think.
Stop there.
Yes, because it's a different movement.
Good.
And we'll continue